So let me just say a few words about why we're all here. Today is the day when Palestinians around the world mark the Nakba. There is no Palestinian anywhere whose family was not marked by the events of 1948. And today is a day when personally, I am particularly conscious of my dual identity. I am the grandson of a woman called Nazli Jamal and a man called Shukri Jamal. And Nazli and Shukri in April 1948 were forced to flee from their home, their beautiful home in West Jerusalem, soon after the massacre at Deir Yassin, which occurred a few short miles from where they were living. They died in exile. Today is a day when I remember that I am the great nephew of a man called Shibli Jamal. And Shibli came to London in 1921 as part of a delegation of Palestinians coming to negotiate with Winston Churchill, who was then the Secretary of State for the colonies, and they were demanding the overthrow of the Balfour Declaration. The delegation went home empty-handed, but in the year they spent in the UK in fruitless negotiation, they attended the very first pro-Palestine rally to be held in London. And I believe that my great uncle Shibli spoke at that rally. Nearly 100 years of Palestinians coming to the UK, coming to the West, asking for justice. And I'm also the son of a British mother and born and raised in the UK. And so I am the citizen of a complicit state. So this is a day of commemoration, but it is also a day on which we celebrate. We come together today to celebrate the endurance and the sumud of the Palestinian people who have refused over 70 years, over 72 years, over 100 years to succumb to injustice. Now, most of you will recall Ben-Gurion, Israel's first leader, reportedly once said that Palestinian resistance would inevitably crumble because the old would die and the young would forget. Tonight, we will be hearing from Palestinians who directly experience the events of 1948 and continue to endure and to resist. And we will hear from young Palestinians who are here to say that their generation has not forgotten and are giving the lie to Ben-Gurion's words through their active and continuing resistance. So we are here to celebrate Palestinian voices, but we are here too as solidarity activists to spread solidarity. Solidarity begins, does it not, as an act of empathy, as an act of love, in the simple recognition of our common humanity and the understanding that an injustice delivered to one in the world anywhere is an injustice to all everywhere. But solidarity calls us beyond love to act. Now, the last voice you are all going to hear from tonight will belong to Omar Barghouti. And I had the great pleasure earlier this year of taking Omar to many meetings around London. And at each one, he was asked the same question: what should we do? And to each question, he gave the same answer: end your complicity. So we gather tonight to commemorate, to celebrate, and to mobilize, to renew our commitment to campaign, to boycott, to divest, to call for sanctions until the Palestinian people enjoy what is their birthright: freedom, justice, and equality in their historic homeland. So let's get moving. Let's start our rally. And I'm really pleased to introduce our first speaker, Yara Hawari. Yara is a brilliant young activist, academic, and writer who works for the Al-Shabaka network. And Yara is speaking to us tonight directly from Palestine. Yara.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and thanks for all my fellow speakers. This is a really sad day for a lot of Palestinians. It's the commemoration of 72 years of Nakba, but I think it's actually twofold. It's both sad and empowering. It's sad because we remember how our society was shattered in 1948, how our people continue to be dispersed, imprisoned, killed, our lands are increasingly being taken from us. But it's also empowering because we survived ethnic cleansing. And despite the exile of over half of our people, we still have a presence on the land. But I think it's important here to note that the Nakba is not only a historical event, It's a continuous process of erasure and displacement. Now, this year, as we mark 72 years of this continuous process, one word really seems to be taking front and center stage, and that's annexation, especially ever since the announcement of the Trump deal of the century at the end of January this year. Formal annexation of the West Bank by the Israeli regime has been looming. So I think it's important for us to know what annexation actually means in non-legal jargon. And very simply, it means the theft of Palestinian land, the total control over it and the resources, usually the displacement of Palestinian communities. And yet, whilst the mainstream media and most institutional political actors are talking about it as a possibility in the case of Palestine, it's important to stress that annexation has already happened. This happened initially in 1948 with the foundation of the settler colonial state of Israel, and later with the occupation of the 1967 territories, the Syrian Golan, the West Bank, and Gaza. And then there was a de facto annexation of the latter. Formal annexation simply means an acceleration of a process that's already underway. Now, I'm saying all this not to be defeatist, actually to the contrary. I think it's important that we link the context of 1948 and of the ethnic cleansing to what is happening today, so that we understand this for what it is, that we rethink our strategy, and so that we can work together to bring about a more just future, not just for Palestinians, but for all people, really. Now, one of the hashtags to this rally is the key to justice. And I really think what an opportunity for us all for all of us to think about what that really is, especially in the context of the pandemic, which is really revealing structures of power all over. Colonialism, capitalism, patriarchy, they're all working together to keep people, including the Palestinian people, oppressed and excluded. Palestinian liberation will only be achieved when women are liberated, when the working classes are liberated, and when the refugees return home. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And I know it's a bit strange doing a rally online. It certainly was for me, but these circumstances require us all to adapt and to think about solidarity and networks in new and creative ways. So thank you again for joining, and looking forward to the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Yara. Okay, I'm going to move straight on to our second speaker, and I'm very pleased and proud to announce Ghada Karmi is a patron of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign in the UK. She's a writer, she's an academic, she's a doctor, she's an activist. If you haven't read Ghada's autobiographical work In Search of Fatima, which recounts her personal story of the Nakba, I urge you to do so. Please welcome Ghada Karmi.
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Ghada.
Yes, good. Okay. Hello, everybody, and all those who've joined us, and all those people who are watching Facebook. Hello to you, a Palestinian salute from me, one of the dwindling number of people who experienced the Nakba at first hand. Let me share with you something of what that felt like, because it's actually shaped my whole life. Not just the memories of leaving, not just the difficulties of exile, but really to give you a flavor of that April morning in 1948, when we in West Jerusalem had to leave our house in haste, fearing for our lives, and rushing to the only place we could think of where we could have refuge, which was in Damascus with my grandparents. But when the moment of leaving came, I remember only because I was a child, all I can remember is that I was leaving everything I knew, everything I loved, and going somewhere I didn't know, I didn't want to go, and everything in me rebelled. Well, of course, we left. We thought we were going to go back pretty soon. We never did, because you know what the story is. And it so happened that we stayed in Damascus for a while only, and then ended up in England, the very country which had enabled the Zionists who took over our land and had colluded and sold us down the river. What an irony. But I grew up in England. I didn't know the language when we came. The whole place was alien to me. It was very difficult. But finally, well, I managed it, we managed it. But you know, the Nakba made me who I am. It blighted my family's life. It even affects the generation after us, my daughter, and probably her children. It is an event indescribable in its magnitude, in its awfulness, in its cruelty. And I grew up in England, wondering whatever happened to the people we knew in Palestine. There was no way we could connect with them, find out where they went. There was no organization which followed up everybody. So you could find out what had happened. Even if they died, at least you knew what had happened. That we couldn't do. And so I filled it in very often with imagination, with fantasy, and so on. Well, after this long life, here I am, an activist and a fighter for Palestine, and I will never rest until the day we Palestinians return to our homeland and the whole nightmare ends. I ask you to support us in that endeavor, to help to fight injustice and to help the Palestinian people to go home.
Thank you, Ghada. I don't know about the rest of you. I find it impossible to be at a rally without doing some chanting, but this is going to have to be an exercise of trust because I can't see you all and I'm not going to be able to hear any of you. So I'm going to ask you just to chant with me in the comfort of your own home. Free, free, Palestine! Free, free, Palestine! Free, free, Palestine! I trust you all joined in. Okay, this is a point where I'm going to ask you to prepare yourself for an action that we're going to do shortly in the rally. We've asked everyone coming today to bring a key with them. Some of you hopefully have had the time to make your own keys. If you haven't, there is still time for you to draw a key on a piece of paper or to set a key as your virtual backdrop. And there'll come a moment where we're going to ask everyone to display those keys so they can be seen together in an act of solidarity. But before that, we're going to have our first musical interlude, and we're going to hear from Dam. Now, Dam means everlasting in Arabic, and they are the first Palestinian hip-hop crew, and amongst the first to rap in Arabic. Their music has been described as the most entertaining, original, and socially engaged music to come out of the Middle East. Let's hear from Dam.
ملياردات الدولارات عشان نعيش في شتات. ملياردات الدولارات عشان نعيش في شتات. ملياردات الدولارات عشان نعيش في شتات. ملياردات الدولارات عشان نعيش في شتات.
Wow. Okay, I'm going to give you all a moment to regroup because I'm sure you've all been dancing around your rooms. So I'll give you a moment to restore your dignity. Just a reminder to keep posting, please, in the chat. So let's move on. And I'm really, really delighted to welcome our next speaker, another one of Palestine Solidarity Campaign's patrons, one of the world's greatest filmmakers, a warrior for justice, social and international, a great friend of the Palestinian people. I am particularly delighted, I have to say, and relieved to be introducing him to speak at a virtual rally, because I've had the experience of taking him to the front of the stage at a real rally, and it's a very frustrating experience because every single person in the room wants to shake hands with him, and he insists on having a conversation with them all, and you usually get him up onto the stage about 2 hours after the rally has ended. So I'm delighted that he can't shake hands with 1,000 people, but I'm sure he'll want to give you all a virtual handshake. Please welcome Ken Loach. Ken, you need to unmute yourself.
Oh God, where do I do that?
You're good. You're done. You're done.
Okay. It's a real pleasure to be here. You'll notice my technical incompetence to do with IT. It's a privilege to be asked to say a few words with people with such experiences, which I can only learn from. I'd like to make 3 points, really. The first is that we must keep telling the story of 1948 and what has happened since. And it's a story of dispossession, of Palestinians losing their land, of losing their homes, of being killed with impunity, and the daily oppression that would destroy most of us. And they're still there. And this meeting, I know, is a tribute to their endurance and to their courage and to their solidarity with one another. I only know from 1948 from reading about it. And the 3 quotations that I've picked out that in a way maybe capture something of what happened. The first is a quotation from Ben Gurion in 1938. And he said many things that illustrated what was to happen. But I think this is as clear as anything what was intended. And he said, after we become a strong force, as the result of the creation of a state, we shall abolish partition and expand to the whole of Palestine. That was the intention, clear intention in 1938. And a couple of quotations from a magisterial book by Allan, great historian. And this is his a brief account of the methods that were worked out at a meeting on the 10th of March in 1948. A meeting that he says was of veteran Zionists and youthful militants. And they intended to remove the Palestinians, forcibly evict them, by these methods: by large-scale intimidation, laying siege and bombarding villages and population centres, setting fire to houses, properties and goods, expulsions, demolitions, and planting mines. And we know what was up to 800,000 people were expelled, 530 odd villages destroyed. Atrocities including rape, massacres, poisoning water supplies, and so on, and many more. And the conclusion, which I think is we have to carry with us, and is the motive for this meeting, certainly for me, is that in Pape's words, it was a simple but horrific story of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, a crime against humanity that Israel has wanted to deny and cause the world to forget. And up to today, when Mike Pompeo, the US Secretary of State, met Netanyahu, I believe, on Wednesday to discuss the annexation, as Yara described. And so we continue to tell the story. And the second thing I want to say is we must not be intimidated. We know those who do tell the story face abuse, vilification, accusations of racism, accusations of anti-Semitism. It's a campaign that has brought down the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the Labour Party. But we mustn't be we mustn't be put off by that. We have to tell the story. We know the mass media will collude in that fake campaign, but we have to stand strong, because the abuse that we get here is nothing compared to what the Palestinians suffer in real life, in their daily lives. And the third thing I want to say is what can we do? What can we do? I think political activity is vital. In our trade unions, we need to organise and pass resolutions so that the unions recognise, as some unions have, the Fire Brigade Union in particular here, to their credit. We recognise the struggle of the Palestinians in our unions and offer support through unions. In political parties, of course, in particular, we have to, in the Labour Party, those who are members, must invite Palestinian speakers or speakers on their behalf. We must pass resolutions. We must demand that the party stands by its manifesto commitment to recognise the state of Palestine. That's absolutely a fundamental requirement that we must fight for. We must fight in universities where Palestinian demonstrations and meetings have been closed down. So there's a big campaign to be waged in universities and in churches too, for those who are religious and are active in churches. Then please campaign for human rights, campaign for the rights of the Palestinians. This is a matter of international law, and it's a matter of human solidarity. And the third way in which we can help, and maybe I feel this more than most, we need to challenge the great and the good. Where are the writers? Where are the musicians? There are some who are always there, who always can be relied on. Where are the rest? Where are the glitterati? Where are the great and the good authors that in the literary salons of London? Let them stand up. Let them demand the rights that all people are entitled to, of security at home, security in their lives, security in their country. Where are they? And I would remind them who stay silent of the words of Yevgeny Yevtushenko, the Soviet dissident and poet. And he said, where truth is replaced by silence, silence is a lie. And finally, we must support the boycott and divestment and sanctions movement. When politicians are silent, when politicians collude in the breaches of international law, they stand by when people are killed with impunity, then civil society must act and join that peaceful demonstration of our determination that Israel should pay a price for the oppression. And the boycott and divestment and sanctions movement, and particularly the cultural and academic boycott, which is not against individuals. It is where the state of Israel is involved in promoting events. So that's what we can do. We know the truth. We know that the Palestinians continue to be oppressed. And we have to tell the truth and let the world hear it. Let the world hear it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ken, and thank you for your reminder of our responsibilities as solidarity activists, and just briefly picking up on what Ken said about the importance of the role of trade unions. We are very proud at PSC in the UK that most of the UK's trade unions affiliate to PSC, and most of them have passed motions supporting boycott, divestment and sanctions as an important part of the solidarity work that we undertake. We apologise for the small technical glitch there. I hope it was temporary. We have got a whole host of fantastic speakers to come. We've got poetry coming up from Remy Canarsie. We've got music from the trio Joubran and from Roger Waters. I'm going to move now to our next speaker, and I said at the start that we were going to span the generations and we were going to hear from young voices who give the lie to David Ben-Gurion's words, who have not forgotten and continue to resist. And an important young voice is that of Janna Jihad from the village of Nabi Saleh. She's an activist, she's a journalist. She acquired fame by being identified as probably the world's youngest journalist, initially using her mother's iPhone at the age of 7 after witnessing the killing of 2 family members by IDF soldiers that had entered her village. She continues to capture videos, she uploads them to social media platforms. Will you please welcome Janna Jihad?
My name is Janna Jihad and I'm 14 years old. I'm talking to you right now from the village of Nabi Saleh in Palestine. I'm also known for recording what happens here in Nabi Saleh and in Palestine, in which I started doing at the age of 7. I started documenting how we live as Palestinian children under the Israeli occupation, how we suffer, how our rights are getting violated, our childhood is getting violated. So me and my friends, I have a lot of friends, so we usually like to sit with old people. We like to go and see our grandparents and things like that and hear their stories because it's part of our Palestinian history. So a lot of times when we sit with these old people, old beautiful souls and people, they usually tell us about when they were about our age. They tell us how they were living in their house with their beautiful family, having a lot of their beautiful friends and, you know, neighbors in their big, beautiful house in Haifa or Akka or Lod or Jaffa, a lot of cities in Palestine or a lot of villages. And they would tell us that out of nowhere an occupier came and kicked them out of their houses and kicked them out of their lands and just, you know, took all their memories that they built in these places away from them. So they would tell us about that, and then they'd say we thought it was a matter of a couple weeks. Then a week became a month became a year became 72 years. So today it's been about 72 years since the Nakba had happened. Since about 1 million people were kicked out of their lands. Imagine how many children were in these 1 million of people. How many children lost their dolls, their toys, their family members, their parents, their friends. How many children became refugees. How many children just lost their lives due to this war and due to this occupation. So even in my village here in Nabi Saleh, we had this neighbor. She was a really old woman who she was a refugee. I think she came from a village called Beit Nabala, which is in historical Palestine, in the land that was occupied in the 48 places. So she would always come here and we would talk a lot, and she passed away just dreaming that she would go back to her land. She was about my age when she was kicked out, and then nothing happened. She didn't go back to her land. But hopefully the next generation would, and that's what we're aiming for. The next generation should go back to their land. She was dreaming on going back and seeing her land, her trees that she usually liked to plant, this beautiful place, this beautiful mosque that she used to always go to. Even me, as a person, as a Palestinian child, my house is in Nabi Saleh, as I said, and Nabi Saleh is only 30 minutes away from Jaffa. So in the morning, you can literally go to our roof in our house, and we can see the sea that we've never been to because of the occupation. We cannot go to the sea. I dream about the sea as a Palestinian child. I wish that I could go swim there, but I can never because of the occupation. And that's our life as Palestinian children, and yes, it's been happening from 72 years. Palestinian children are still, to this day, getting kicked out of their lands, getting kicked out of their houses are getting demolished. Even a lot of children are getting arrested. As you know, you may have read about the Palestinian child prisoner issue, which is a big thing, because why in the world would a child go to jail because of them trying to defend their family, their rights, themselves, or their lands? A lot of children got killed. Like, for example, today a 15-year-old child was killed and murdered by the Israeli occupation. A lot of children were getting arrested in Ya'bad. A lot of people were getting arrested. It's been happening, and as we all know, the world has been going through a pandemic, which is the coronavirus pandemic, and everything has stopped. We cannot go to our schools, our jobs, and everything has stopped except for the occupation. The occupation has not stopped. We're still living under the occupation. They're still raiding my village. I'm still waking up in the middle of the night on the sound of gas canisters bombing near my window. I have experienced a lot of things. I've seen people getting killed in front of me and my family members. It's traumatizing seeing people that you love getting hurt. And for us to end that, we need to unite. We need to put hand to hand with you guys so we can make the world a world of peace, a world of love, a world of equality and justice, so we can liberate Palestine and make this world a better place.
Wow. Wow, thank you, Janna. Okay, this is now your last moment to prepare your keys, because we're going to ask you to display them in a minute. We're going to hear now from the fantastic, the inspirational Remy Canarsie. Remy, you don't need me to tell you, is a Palestinian American performance poet, writer, organizer. He's the author of 2 collections of poetry, and his political commentary has been featured by news outlets throughout the world. Remy is going to read a first poem, then he's going to come back to me, and then I'm going to give you some instructions about preparing for the action in relation to the keys, which we're going to do as Remy reads the second poem. So let me hand over to Remy Canarsie.
Thanks for having me. Just to preface this poem a bit, it's called Nakba. It's an older piece, so I'm going to be reading off a book. But my parents and grandparents are refugees from 1948. Until my grandmother's dying day, everything was Yafa, Yafa, Yafa. It was always about return. And I think particularly within the context of COVID and coronavirus, thinking about disposability, be that Palestinians, be that refugees, be that Black and brown communities, apparently be that anybody over the age of 60 in the United States, and how we're connecting the past, the present, and the future, talking about the right of return, talking about ending occupation and apartheid. This isn't about BDS, my poem, but boycott, divestment, and sanctions, taking actions in your local communities, building solidarity, and really thinking about the ways in which countries and corporations and systems of power profit off of all of our suffering. So thinking about our catastrophe, something that's ongoing, but it kind of connects to a larger system that's putting a lot of people in marginalized places. So this is called Nakba. And my grandmother was pregnant. I guess the one context piece, my grandmother was pregnant with my mom when she was kicked out of Palestine in 1948. I think this is good. I'm gonna stay back here. She was scared. 7 months pregnant, guns pointed at temples, tears dropping, stomach cusped, back bent, dirt pathways leading to dispossession. Rocking boats, waves crashing, people rushing, falling over each other, packing into small spaces, like memories. Her home, mandated, occupied, cleansed, conquered, terrorizers sat on hills sniping children, neighbors fled on April 10th. Word came of massacre. They stayed, didn't fight, didn't flee, shells and bombs bursting in air like anthems, prayed for the dead with priests and imams, prayed for the living, looking over shoulders for the Ergun and Haganah. Raised life, planted trees, painted fruit, cared for the road as if it was her garden. Orphaned twice. At birth, from Palestine, whispered Yafa till final breath, never knew essence until she found emptiness, 48 ways to flee, and she found Beirut. Bullet holes in buildings, reminder of home, but not home. Years later, daughters sat on hills in the south, dreaming of breaking water never touched, thinks of their mother, that warrior, how battles still raged here and abroad, orchards flourished, propagandists called them barons, land expropriated for Europeans thirsting for territory. Colonist, not native, not from here, plant flags, call it home, rename cities and villages, uprooting graveyards, wiping, cleaning, cleansing memories that this is not theirs. August 22nd, 2009. Frail hands shook, lip trembled, didn't want to die, but suffer decades. She will speak Arabic, broken English, wounded words and murmurs, her eyes close, but every so often they blink brilliance. Memories that cannot be erased, uprooted, or stolen. We have not forgotten. We will not forget. Veins like roots of olive trees, we will return. That is not a threat, not a wish, a hope, or a dream, but a promise.
Thank you, Remy. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna let you all into a secret. It's a secret from my staff at PSC, so I'm going to ask you not to let them know. But I'm not desperately technically competent. So I'm going to read you some instructions now, because the thing we want to do now is going to work best for each of you if you're in gallery view. And in order to get into gallery view, if you go to the top right of your screen, you will see that there's an option to click on either gallery or speaker view. If you move your mouse, there's an icon on the top right. It looks like 9 small squares, like a phone keyboard. If you click on that, you will go into gallery view. So this is the moment where we're going to ask you all to display your keys. And we hope that you'll be able to see everybody's keys. And as we display them, Remy is going to read a poem by the national poet of Palestine, Mahmoud Darwish.
The poem's called I Belong There, or I Come From There. This version is from, unfortunately, it was Paradise by Mahmoud Darwish, edited by and translated by Munir Akash and Carolyn Forche, with help throughout the book with Sanan Antoun and Amira El-Zain. I belong there. I have many memories. I was born as everyone is born. I have a mother, a house with many windows, brothers, friends, and a prison cell with a chilly window. I have a wave snatched by seagulls, a panorama of my own. I have a saturated window, meadow, and the deep horizon of my word. I have a moon, a bird's sustenance, and an immortal olive tree. I have lived on the land long before swords turned man into prey. I belong there. When heavens mourn for my mother, for her mother, I return heaven to her mother, and I cry so that a returning cloud may carry my tears. To break the rules, I've learned all the words needed for a trial by blood. I've learned and dismantled all the words in order to draw from them a single word: home.
Thank you, Remy. Okay, we're going to move to our next speaker, and this is the final speaker in this section. And I'm going to welcome a young philosophy student from South Africa, a member of the BDS Coalition of South Africa. We please welcome William Shoki.
Thank you very much, Ben, and thank you very much, everyone, for having me here today. Let us not forget that 1948 was not only a significant year for Palestinians, but it was also a significant year for South Africans, for it was the year that the National Party government officially enacted the policy of apartheid for all South Africans, wherein Black South Africans were systematically disenfranchised, dispossessed of their land, and relegated to second-class citizenship within their own territories. And 72 years since then, the legacies of this exclusion still reverberate in our society today, in the spatial inequality that we face, in the economic inequality that we face, and the racial inequality that we face. But as much as we are still struggling with many issues today, we are entirely indebted to the international community who in the 1970s and the 1980s, and indeed throughout the entirety of apartheid, decided that they could not sit and watch this brutal discrimination take place on their watch. And it was during this time, as we talk of keys, that students were in many ways the key to the success of the boycotts, divestments, and sanctions movement that gained traction in university campuses across the world. And as I stand here before all of you today, a question I can't stop asking myself is, how have we as students been unable to replicate the momentum, to replicate the intensity and the ferocity of the anti-apartheid campaigns that students like us undertook in the 1970s and the 1980s? Because we are truly in a situation in which the brutality and the cruelty that Palestinians have been facing, that they continue to face, and that they will face in the future as Trump continues to push his peace plan, his so-called peace plan in the Middle East, as the West Bank is preparing for annexations, and as the pandemic continues to wreak catastrophe in the occupied territories. We as students need then to come together and ask ourselves, how can we replicate the success of the anti-apartheid movement that was able to bring down an apartheid government here in South Africa? How can we bring down an apartheid government in Israel? As students, we have been at the forefront of movements to radically change society. In recent years, we were at the forefront of the Fees Must Fall and Roads Must Fall protests here in South Africa, at the forefront of Black Lives Matter in the United States and the UK, indeed at the forefront of any movement that tries to progress towards a society based on justice and equality for all. And as progressive movements across the world are in a truly unprecedented time being demobilized and relegated to our homes, a lot of us can be despondent. A lot of us can think that there is not much avenue for us to do anything meaningful in order to push forward a campaign for justice everywhere. But we should not think that way. As students, we should be the ones who are thinking of innovative ways of waging struggle for a COVID era. We as students should be trying to coordinate our actions across the world. So what I decided to take my opportunity in speaking to the world today was to say is that let us as students view this time in which we are relegated to our homes, in which we have to move our classes online, in which we are separated from our peers and classmates. Let us take this as an opportunity to prepare. Let us connect with each other, whether we are in the United Kingdom, in the United States, Australia, any part of the world, it doesn't matter. Let us take this as an opportunity to prepare to wage an onslaught after this, to push our universities to adopt cultural and academic boycotts, to educate our fellow students on the struggle, which continues to be of marginal concern across campuses. We have to prove Giron incorrect. We have to prove that the young will never forget. Thank you.
Thank you so much, William. You know, it takes a whole body of inspirational speakers to engage 1,000 people online for an hour and a half. But boy, do we have a range of inspirational speakers. We've heard from so many already. We've got more to come. And we've got music coming up from Roger Waters and the trio Joubran. This is the bit now where we become a little bit like the Eurovision Song Contest, because I'm now going to hand over to my co-host and leave you in her more than capable hands, from an organisation that constantly inspires us in the UK, from the wonderful Jewish Voice for Peace. Will you please welcome their director, Stefanie Fox.
Ben, thank you so much. It's an honor to work with you, PSC, BNC, everyone here today. I'm just blown away and so moved and ready to be here all, you know, the 1,000 of us on the screen. As I was scrolling through screen after screen of us holding our keys, feeling the energy of this rally today. Ben, thanks for handing it over. I'm so grateful for your emceeing all throughout the first. I wanted to talk a little bit before we get on with the rest of the incredible program about, for us at JVP and for me, what this day means. As a Jewish person, I still and always remember the first time that I saw a picture of Palestinian families, in this case being loaded into boats by Jewish militias, a part of the expulsion of Palestinians from Haifa in '48. That photo is just etched indelibly in my mind, because it taught me that one of the foundational tenets I was raised with in modern day Zionism, that the quote unquote, Arabs want to drive Jews into the sea, had actually happened, but in reverse. That, as everyone has described so incredibly poignantly here today, it was Zionist militias wielding guns and explosives and driving the Palestinian population of Haifa, families and babies and grandparents, like we've heard from all day, into rickety boats and forced to flee to Gaza or Egypt, not yet having returned. And it hurts me to say it, but it was Jewish Zionist militias driving Palestinians into the sea, not the other way around. And it's not an accident that, in spite of plentiful documentation, that as an American and as a Jewish person, this history was not only a surprise, but actually a reversal of what I had been taught. The Israeli government, supported by most American Jewish institutions, has worked from that moment, from its inception, at the dual aims of continuing the Nakba while also obscuring it from view. And such a great catastrophe unfolding for 72 years requires enormous complicity on every level. You take the Jewish National Fund, which was planting pine trees over the ruins of at least 40 destroyed villages in '48, and today is partnering with evangelical Christian station God TV to plant those same trees over Al-Araqib, which has been nearly destroyed nearly 200 times, or corporations like Elbit and G4S that facilitate and profit from apartheid and mass imprisonment, or the Jewish and Christian Zionist organizations in the US channeling money into settlements and into vicious attacks on the movement for justice in Palestine, and the US government spending billions of taxpayer dollars to fund all of that Israeli injustice against Palestinians. I believe that the Palestinian Nakba is not only a defining moment in Palestinian history, as Ben and so many others here have described, but also, just like slavery and settler colonialism in the US are not just the histories of African Americans or Native Americans. They define America. And as a white American, it was my family there too, on the other side of the gun. Those are my histories to understand, to internalize, to undo. In the same way, I invite my fellow Jews watching here on the Zoom call, in the many thousands online beyond, tonight, refuse complicity with the Nakba and its erasure in our communities. Let us use this moment of social isolation to reach out to our own people, to someone else in your life. Have that hard conversation. Use resources like available on JVP's website with the Facing the Nakba curriculum. Learn together, study together, commit together. Because today, as Palestinians are commemorating this 72nd anniversary of the Nakba, and as Israel is preparing to annex another third of the West Bank, the Israeli Jewish and American Jewish communities have another chance to decide our future. Do we accede to a future rooted in denial and continue to allow annexation and ethnic cleansing and apartheid in our names? Or do we engage with hard truth and bring our whole selves to the struggle of repair for these harms? At JVP, we choose the struggle for justice over silence and complicity. We choose to join with Palestinians and many, many across the globe who support the right of return for Palestinians as part of a shared future of justice, equality, and freedom for all people. I invite fellow Jews, everyone here today, to join us. We'll drop a link in the chat of a petition declaring commitment and solidarity with the right of return. It's just the energy in this rally today making me certain that this movement, led by Palestinians, joined by so many of us around the world, is unlocking a future where real healing and where real justice is not only possible, but is inevitable. I'm so, so happy and quite honored to get to introduce as our next speaker, Diana Buttu, the renowned and incredible Al-Shabaka policy advisor, who's also a lawyer and has previously served as a legal advisor to the Palestinian negotiating team and was part of the team that assisted in the successful litigation of the wall before the International Court of Justice. She frequently comments on Palestine for international news media outlets such as CNN and BBC, and is a political analyst for Al Jazeera International and a regular contributor to the Middle East magazine. She maintains a law practice in Palestine, focusing on international human rights law, and I think all of us, many of us on this call, look to her to lead us forward. Diana, I'm honored to hand the mic to you.
Thank you very much, Stefanie, and thank you very much, Ben, and thank you for putting together such a wonderful group of speakers and artists. I'm very grateful and honored to be part of this today. I'm going to read a testimony from my father, and I hope you'll bear with me as I read through it. I was 9 years old when my world changed. I was born in 1939 in Nazareth, Palestine, the sixth of 9 children, and grew up in a small town nearby called Limjedel. I have fond memories of my childhood, of playing with my cousins who lived in the neighborhood, and the smell of fresh almonds, lemons, and of rain. But in April 1948, everything changed. My father was returning from Haifa when the car he was in was stopped by members of a Zionist militia who tied up, blindfolded, and abducted him along with the other passengers. We had no idea where he was or whether he was alive or dead. The mass expulsion of Palestinians by Zionist paramilitaries was in full swing, with tens of thousands already driven from their homes and terror and chaos spreading through the country. My mother, convinced that my father had been killed, held a funeral for him. My world was shattered. After 3 weeks, my father was suddenly released without explanation. When he returned home, he learned that Zionist fighters were approaching our town. Fearing for our safety, he decided to flee with us to Nazareth, where he hoped to find temporary refuge before returning back to Limjedel. 6 weeks later, the city was attacked. That day, I was in the market with my father. I can still vividly recall bullets landing between my feet. My father decided to move once more, and we set out on foot to the north on a nearly 50-mile journey to Lebanon alone. I was separated from my mother and siblings for weeks, and all that I really wanted during that time was to hug my mother, to play with my siblings and cousins, and to be at home. With the passage of time, we realized that the world was not going to liberate Palestine and to allow us to go home. So in 1950, my father decided that we would return on our own. Making his way to Jordan, he walked across the border into Israel through the West Bank, arriving back in Nazareth. The rest of us followed shortly thereafter, making the journey on foot as well, except for my eldest sister, who stayed behind in Jordan because she had a young child and feared being killed by Israeli soldiers on the journey, as many Palestinians had been who tried to return. Upon returning, we discovered that the roughly 150,000 Palestinians who remained inside what was now Israel were treated as unwelcome foreigners in our very own country. Although we were given citizenship, most of our land was taken from us, and we were put under military rule until 1966. My mother and all of us were prosecuted for infiltrating back to our own country, and we were ordered deported. We were only given a reprieve and spared a second expulsion as a result of mass protests by Palestinians who feared that Israel planned to expel all those who still remained. But although we were allowed to stay, the wounds we suffered were still fresh and painful. Limjedel's homes had been completely wiped off the map, including mine, leveled and replaced with new ones built for Jewish immigrants. The mosque was destroyed, as was the Muslim cemetery. All that remains today are 2 churches and a Christian cemetery. Today, a park and a L'Oreal factory stand on the site of my hometown. A sign in the park says that the town was established in 1950. I was born in 1939, by Iranian immigrants. Imagine what it's like to watch helplessly as your home and your most cherished personal possessions are taken by strangers or destroyed, and the history of your people and family erased. More than 400 Palestinian towns and villages were systematically destroyed or taken over for use by Jewish Israelis, and hundreds of Palestinians were killed in some 24 massacres that spurred the refugee flight. Yet today, Israel continues to steal Palestinian land, continues to revoke residency rights, and destroy Palestinian homes so that Jewish Israelis can live in their place. For more than 53 years, Palestinians in the occupied territories have lived under oppressive military rule with no rights, while Palestinian citizens of Israel are subject to dozens of laws that discriminate against us. One of these laws prevents us from reuniting with family members who were expelled in 1948, my sister among them. Although she was born, raised, married, and gave birth to her first child, Al-Mjedil, Israel has refused to let her return and rejoin our family. As a result, she lived out her days in Jordan, where she passed away in 2002, still longing to return home. My cousins remain scattered throughout the world. The Nakba wasn't just a historical event. It continued unabated for 72 years. Every time I leave Nazareth, I pass the town where I grew up. Although I can still see it, and I still have the deeds to more than 100 acres of land, I cannot return and live there. I have one grandchild, a precious 6-year-old boy who I love more than anything else in the world. I dream of a day when he can live in freedom and equality in my homeland, and I pray that he does not have to endure the same suffering that we've gone through as a result of the racist apartheid regime that Israel has established in our land. But I don't just pray for it. I know it will happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Wow. Your father talking about your son. The intimacy of getting to hear your story, Diana, and the stories here today is a true honor, and also let it convict us and drive us to action and commitment to that inevitability. Thank you so much. We're going to hear now, and we can think and reflect on that incredible testimony that Diana shared in of her family, her father. As we hear now from another performance, we're very lucky to get to hear from Adnan Joubran from the trio Joubran, which is a trio of brothers, Samir, Wassam, and Adnan, from Palestine, from a family of oud makers and players. Through their mesmerizing music, they honor the struggles and oppression of indigenous people around the world, and especially affirm that their music should be a part of the struggle of the Palestinian people for recognition and liberation. Let's just take it away. Adnan, we're so happy to hear from you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the stage. Thanks to all of you who joined us for this special day. Allow me just to make you listen to this 16 seconds of important voice and important speech from Nazareth, from where I was born. Now that was the voice of Tawfiq Zayed in the 80s, who back then used to be the mayor of Nazareth. And in this speech, he's saying actually that there are people, certain people, who are trying to delete and make us forget this special day, Yawm al-Ard, the Nakba Day, the day of the land. And they are trying to turn it into a picnic day, a holiday. Now back then, indeed, we used to go holiday and picnicking in mountains and in small places. So I got confused, and I asked my father, actually, are we grieving or are we celebrating in this day? And he said, in every place that we come and picnic, in every place, there used to be homes who had to flee those places. Like your grandmother, born in Syrian, had to flee for a shelter in Nazareth, like many families. So on this day, we come here to remember the places, the few bits that we left here. So we're not celebrating, definitely, we are grieving. And we have to keep going there and remembering those places. Thanks to everyone.
Wow. I hope you see the round of applause, 60 screens long. That was phenomenal and so moving and inspiring. Thank you so much. We have one more musical performance in a little bit here and another action that we're going to take together. But before we get there, I'm really excited and quite humbled to get to introduce Mandla Mandela. Chief Mandla Mandela is an ANC MP in South Africa and a grandson of Nelson Mandela. He is an outspoken and principled supporter of Palestinian rights and of BDS to achieve them. And it's wonderful and quite exciting to get to hand the rally mic over to you, Chief. Thanks.
Stefanie and Ben, thank you for inviting me to this virtual rally of the Nakba Day. Honorable colleagues, elders, and comrades, brothers and sisters in the struggle for a free Palestine, I bring you greetings from the revolutionary people of South Africa who define your Nakba as their own Nakba, your pain as their own pain, and your suffering as their suffering, just as you inevitably victory will be the fulfilling of our very own struggle. Today, the world is in grips with the COVID-19 pandemic. It is characterized by mass assassination, indiscriminate deaths, and the total destruction of life as we know it. There are very characteristics that has defined life in Palestine for the past 7 decades, while the world stood by watching in silence or in complicit. Today, the world is encountering what the people of Palestine has been experiencing for the past 72 years, in the grasp of a struggle against an enemy that is indiscriminate, that is wreaking havoc with the social and economic life. Today, millions in the world is experiencing the daily grind of poverty and what it means to eke out a living, cut off from your lands, your business, and life as you know it. The world is experiencing what 6 million Palestinians in exile have been experiencing for decades, cut off from their families, from their social circles, and from their livelihoods. The world is trapped in their homes, just as experienced every day by Palestinians in the occupied territories of the West Bank and Gaza, and those languishing in Israeli apartheid jails. In the face of such cataclysmic catastrophe, the Palestinians, however, are determined to shake off the shackles of occupation, just as we, as South Africans, were able to shake off the shackles of apartheid's brutal occupation. In this quest, we stand by you, by your side, until victory dawns. Today, the foundation of Israeli brutality is shaken to its core by the emergence over the past few years of BDS, like the Free Mandela campaign and the anti-apartheid movement's success in its boycott and divestment campaign. BDS has given a new voice to the Palestinian struggle and infused it with new life and energy that is sweeping the world like a tsunami. We call on all freedom-loving people of the world to end the virus of Israeli apartheid and its gross violation of the fundamental human rights of the Palestinian people. We call on all freedom-loving people of the world to stand up against blatant racism in occupied Palestine. We call on students, workers, academics, musicians, artists, traders, civil society, structures, and business to deepen the campaign to boycott, divest, and bring sanctions against apartheid Israel. I call on all activists in the world in this time of global crisis. Let us raise awareness of how apartheid Israel manipulates governments, economies, and power to perpetuate the illegal occupation of Palestine. Today, we share with you in this platform as a virtual rally, and our message is simple. We stand side by side with you and will never abandon you. Your struggle is our struggle. We shall be together until the very end. And we want to say to the whole world to hear, Maibuye I Palestine, as we used to say during our own struggle for liberation. Bring back South Africa. We therefore say today, bring back Palestine. Maibuye I Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What an incredibly inspiring reminder of, as Angela Davis says, the indivisibility of justice and our struggles. Such a beautiful call to action for all of us, wherever we are, whatever hats we wear and identities we have, that we have a place in the solidarity movement led by Palestinians for freedom, liberation, return. And we're gonna feel a part of that moment, that movement right now. We've been so incredibly moved and inspired, I know we have, by this amazing lineup of speakers. And now is a chance to also be moved and inspired by the crowd in this room here today or tonight, right? So go back, as Ben coached us, to the little phone pad, get yourself your screen full of incredible activists all over the world joining in today, like we're in a giant, road blocking traffic is how I want to think about us today, in refusing the injustice that we're talking about all day. And what we're going to do now is like a virtual chant together. So we're all going to, you can hold up your signs or your keys again, or you can just take in the gorgeous faces around you. And just if you know how to take a screenshot, you can do that. It's like a Control F or 4 or whatever it is, or you can take a picture with your phone, document one of these incredible screens where you are. I'm gonna hold up my sign that says "Another Jew for Palestinian Right of Return." And we're going to take screenshots, and then I'm going to tell you one more thing we're going to do with them as part of how we get our chant out in the world. But let's first, I'm going to hold my sign up, and I'm going to see the gorgeous people with me and take this picture. It's like you're getting a little chant going in your own corner of the rally. So take a photo of how you are surrounded by 53 screens of dozens of people. So we're going to do that now. Take your shot here. I'm doing mine. Okay, great. Everybody got it? I see the phones up. I see us in action together. Okay, and now you're gonna take that photo and all the inspiration you have in your bones right now, and we're gonna tweet or Facebook or do what you like, but tweet is probably the best with a hashtag if you can, either hashtag spread solidarity or hashtag key to justice. Share some words if you want about how moved you are by our amazing speakers, or just share the photo of what it's like to get to rally truly together with a community of folks who share the same core values of justice and equality and dignity in all of us. Okay, so great. We took some of our action together, and now I am so excited to hand the mic to Allan Kolski Horwitz. Allan Kolski Horowitz is a poet, a playwright, and a writer of fiction. He is also a long-standing activist involved in the South African and Palestinian struggles. He works in a cultural and politically inspired collective called Buttu. And you know, earlier when we were hearing from Ken about the great and the good, we're quite honored to have many of those culture makers with us here today. And Allan is no exception. Allan, we're excited to hear from you. One second, I'm going to make sure you're unmuted here, Allan.
All right, I'm unmuted. Excellent.
Now we hear you.
The poem I'm going to read was inspired by Hassan Kanafani, one of the foremost Palestinian writers. He was a refugee, a journalist, an editor, and a political activist. He was murdered in Beirut by a bomb planted by the Mossad, the Israeli spy agency. This was on the 8th of July, 1972. He was only 36 years old. At the time, he was the official spokesperson for the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And yet, first and foremost, he was a writer. And in this regard, his obituary in Lebanon's Daily Star stated that he was, quote, a commando who never fired a gun, whose weapon was a ballpoint pen, and his arena, the newspaper pages. Hassan was very clear on his life's purpose, and the following quote from him is an example to all of us who wish to combine our moral, artistic, and political objectives. I write well because I believe in a cause, in principles. The day I leave these principles, my stories will become empty. And the defense of principles is what finally leads to success in everything. The Palestinian cause is not a cause for Palestinians only, but a cause for every revolutionary, as a cause of the exploited and oppressed masses in our era. The title of the poem is The Return of Refugees. Trucks are loaded, donkeys loaded, but not with beds, linen, pots, or kettles, loaded with panic, with defeat, with betrayal. Who owns the past? Who will own the future? Trucks are loaded, donkeys are loaded, loaded at speed, loaded at gunpoint, but not with children, dogs, birds, and rabbits, loaded with threats, bluster, murder, and blackmail. Who owns the past? Who will own the future? Loaded by the innocent, loaded by the weak, at speed, at gunpoint. Trucks are loaded, donkeys loaded, but not with paintings, silverware, books, and prayer beads, loaded with lackeys, absent effendi, colonizers, lying imperialists, Long live the past and the future. And so, convoys of stalled generations, tripping in minefields, hanging on barbed wire, hanging on the past and the future, carrying photographs, diaries and wills, carrying keys, boxes of memory. Then borders evaded, borders crossed, borders spat and trampled on. Then camps, cast out in camps, cramped in camps, camp cities alongside cities. Camps to take the place of places of work, of worship, of study, places of healing. Camps to hold people in check, in reserve, in suspension. But then, in the camps, trucks load defiance and bomb belts. Trucks load young militants. Long live the past and the future. Long live the present. And heavy with hunger, with stench and with sacrifice, with lineage and longing, with resolutions and rights, loaded with anguish. Trucks start their engines, race back to the borders. Trucks cross over and explode. Long live the past and the future, free at last in the present.
Allan, thank you. Taking a big, deep breath. Thank you so much. Wow. And as we contemplate that past and the future and this present that we're in, we're going to have another musical guest in a minute and get to hear from the phenomenal Omar Barghouti before we're done. But first, I'm very excited to get to hand the mic to Firoza Mayet, who's speaking today on behalf of the South African BDS Coalition. Firoza is from South Africa and has been a social activist for over 30 years. She is a member of the Palestine Solidarity Alliance and part of the South Africa BDS Coalition. Thanks so much, Firoza, for being here.
Thank you so much, and revolutionary greetings to all of you and to all in Palestine. The South African Palestine movement has a long history that was strengthened in 1994 with the election of a democratic government and the demise of apartheid. It gained a massive boost when President Mandela announced the need for a free Palestine as an important precursor to the freedom of South Africa. In South Africa, we have a particular role to play in the BDS movement. There are important parallels between apartheid South Africa and Israel, as you all well know. And from our own history, we know the power of an international boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Through the actions of various international and anti-apartheid organizations, apartheid South Africa was isolated from cultural, academic, and sporting events. South African imports were boycotted by international consumers. Under the same political pressure, banks stopped offering lines of credit. Multinational companies either pulled out of operating in South Africa or were shamed on the international stage for their actions. The anti-apartheid boycott movement helped raise the South African profile and provided concrete ways for the international community to offer solidarity and support to the oppressed people of South Africa. Acknowledging that much of Israel's power comes from its geopolitical alliances and position in the world order, as South Africans, we know the power and capacity that a movement such as a global BDS movement can have on an oppressive colonial power. As a global movement with leverage in multiple communities across the world, BDS has the potential to hold Israel accountable to international law and make significant gains in the Palestinian struggle for freedom. The coming together in early 2020 of this year of various South African Palestine solidarity organizations to create a common platform, the South African BDS Coalition, is a significant milestone that has been crossed. We now have an opportunity to be aligned and build a solidarity movement that would contribute to the international movement thus intensifying the pressure on all governments and businesses that support or partner with Zionist Israel. The South African BDS Coalition and the Palestine Solidarity Organizations formed in various parts of South Africa, as well as other civil society organizations, trade unions, and faith-based organizations, totally pledge their support for all actions towards ending the Nakba and supporting the Palestine resistance movement for justice and the right to return. We believe that with the current global crisis, we have an opportunity to mobilize towards a strong international human rights movement. Let's work together and connect the dots between societies and communities that are being devastated by capitalism and neoliberalism. This may be on issues of climate change, food security, ending colonialism and occupation, ending racism and apartheid, and ending gender-based violence. The South African BDS Coalition and its partners commit to working with the international BDS movement and all human rights organizations and activists towards ending the Nakba and towards justice and human rights within South Africa, Palestine, and globally. A luta continua. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So grounding and inspiring to remember that change absolutely happens and that it takes all of us. Thank you. Someone also so committed to this struggle. I'm very excited that we get to hear now from world-renowned rock musician, singer-songwriter, composer, and human rights advocate, Roger Waters. The co-founder of Pink Floyd is an incredibly valued human rights advocate internationally, a BDS supporter, and absolutely steadfast and steady in his solidarity with efforts for Palestinian freedom and equality. Roger, we're so excited to hear your remarks and also some performance from you today.
I have to wear my colors. Hey Omar, hello everybody. It is Nakba Day. I know you know that. I know you've been doing this for a few hours. I'm so happy to be able to join you and have a few words. And also, as you can see behind me, because there are odd guitars and bits of kit, I'm actually in my studio. And I've been recording a song that I think I think the organizers are going to play in a minute. I hope so. It's yet another version of We Shall Overcome, and we will overcome. So here we are, 72 years later. Is there light at the end of the tunnel? I was talking to my great friend Gideon Levy, the Israeli journalist, the other day, and he seemed somewhat discouraged, I have to say. And I can absolutely imagine why. I think if I was an Israeli journalist and a lone voice living in Tel Aviv, amongst the kind of mental and emotional carnage that must represent, I might be discouraged. Well, I'm telling Gideon, and I'm telling you, this is my heartfelt belief, is that we are making huge progress. You are making huge progress. The Palestinian cause is becoming more and more visible and popular and unignorable as the days go by. That is why the Israeli lobby and the Israeli government and the Israeli special, whatever they're called, are trying so hard to destroy the voices of support, of which I'm so proud to count myself as one. So, Gideon, cheer up, mate. This ain't over by a long shot. But when it is over, you will be on the side that won the argument. And you know why? Because you are right. Okay? Because to support international law, to support the Geneva Conventions, to support the basic idea that human beings should have rights, although it's a rather modern idea, is the right idea. And we all know that doing the right thing. My mother used to say to me, when I was a teenager, if I was worrying about something or facing, she said, Roger, darling, you know, a difficult thing in life sometimes is to try and figure out, what you need to do, particularly if there's a knotty problem that you have to think about. Well, the answer is you have to look at the question that you're looking into carefully. You have to listen to all sides of all the arguments, pay careful attention, and then decide what the right thing to do is. Then, she said, bless her, you will have done the hard work, because then you just do it. You just do the right thing. Well, the right thing will be for all the people of Palestine, including the refugees, have proper civil and human rights like we would expect for everyone else in the world. So this is why we're here on Nakba Day. We're here to not just express our huge distress that the Nakba happened 72 years ago and has not yet been corrected, but also our absolute conviction that the goodwill that there is in the world among the billions of people who support your cause will eventually persuade the sociopaths and the monolithic sociopaths who lead some of the governments, like the Israeli government and the government of the United States around the world, who are interested in things other than their fellow human beings and empathy and love. Well, we're not. We are interested in the love of our brothers and sisters. So I won't bang on or get all weird, but I'm so happy to be here with you. Thank you so much for inviting me, and let the show go on. And thank you, Omar. Okay. Love you.
We're now going to play that song that Roger's prepared for us here. We have a link to it.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome one day. Deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome one day. And we'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand one day. Deep in my heart, I do believe that we'll walk hand in hand one day. We'll tear down the prison wall. We will tear down the prison wall. Together we will tear down the prison walls on that day. Deep in my heart, I do believe that we will tear down all those prison walls on that day. And the truth will set us free. The truth will set us free. The truth will set us all free on that day. Deep set us all free on that day. And we'll walk hand in hand. We'll take back the land. We'll plant our olive trees from the Jordan River to the sea, and from Myanmar to Lahore. The thugs will fear to tread. No more kicking in the door. We choose human rights instead. And in Chile and Brazil, El Derecho de Vivir en Paz will echo down the boulevards, eliminating fear. And from Chicago to Portugal, we will draw the battle lines. We will gather on the balconies and throw the windows wide. And we will bang our pots and pans and shout, and the cacerolazo will roll out across the land to each and every spot where any man takes what another man's got, lives in a house that another man built, picks fruit from the land another man tilled, drives in a car on a tarmac road with a tunnel underneath where the local people go. Democracy. Democracy. Across the sea in Wet'suwet'en, another First Nation make their stand, and they will keep the water clean from the mountain to the sea. They will explain it to the man, explain it's Mother Nature's land. We are many and they are few. The water here belongs to me and you. And on this our Nakba Day, we will have our say. For today a child is born, a child of its own. And like a sunbeam through the rain, like a smile through a veil, that child will help me live to see the very first returning refugee. And if we cup our hands like this, like a mantis, like a dove, the child will settle in our palms. The child's name is love. Child's name is love. Child's name is love. The child's name is love. nearly. Oh, bless you all.
Thank you so much, Roger. Wow. Just feeling the love here and where we have to go. And, you know, I was thinking about how when it's harder for me to access that feeling of we shall overcome, I can think of no one better to remind all of us where we're headed and that we will get there and what it's going to take than the incredible leader that's our last speaker and a fitting person to close us out tonight. Omar Barghouti is an incredible Palestinian human rights defender and co-founder of the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions Movement for Palestinian Rights. He is a co-recipient of the 2017 Gandhi Peace Award. And, you know, I think about the dozens of, you know, big conference rooms and little cafes in Seattle and all over the world that I've gotten the honor and privilege of hearing from Omar lead all of our communities and the global solidarity movement forward with humility and so much wisdom and vision about the future we're building. And you know, personally, I just feel humbled to get to follow and to get to partner with you, Omar, and so glad that you'll take us out here today.
Thank you so much, Stefanie. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate being here with all the incredible speakers and performers and artists, Jewish Voice for Peace, PSC, South African BDS Coalition, and everyone who's attending this rally. It's been incredibly inspiring. On behalf of the Palestinian BDS National Committee, the largest coalition in Palestinian society that leads the global BDS movement, I salute you all on this 72nd anniversary of the Palestinian Nakba. While most of the world is reckoning with COVID-19, Palestinians have to resist two afflictions, the pandemic and our ongoing Nakba. Israel and the Zionist movement, as Ben and others have pointed out, had hoped that Palestinians would one day forget. But by perpetrating every imaginable crime against us, they've inadvertently made sure that we never do. Despite the unspeakable agony of the 1948 Nakba, most Palestinians exiled from our homeland carried with them the keys to their beloved homes, clinging to hope that they would soon return. Since then, the Palestinian refugee key has become an icon of the Palestinian tragedy and a reminder that our refugees will one day return. Return has become our key to justice. As we reflect on our Nakba and resist Israel's ongoing Nakba, we also reflect on the many oppressed communities around the world. We're one together against oppression. We reflect on the millions of migrants, refugees, and people experiencing homelessness everywhere, who today have no place to call home due to the social and economic ravages of years of neoliberalism, militarism, and climate destruction. A condition of injustice heightened today due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Many of the refugees are fleeing wars and repression that are fueled by Israeli weapons and military experts from Myanmar to South Sudan, to Rwanda, to Latin America. Many are held back at borders or are forced into life-threatening passages by Israeli technology and Israeli-inspired walls. The US border with Mexico is fortified by a wall and surveillance towers partially built by Israel's largest military company, Elbit Systems. Many asylum seekers have lost their lives in the Mediterranean due to the EU's illegal and immoral anti-immigration policies that use Israel's killer drones. Israel itself treats African asylum seekers as a cancer that must be eradicated. Based on those commonalities, we call for banning arms trade and military security cooperation with Israel, suspending free trade agreements with apartheid Israel, prohibiting all trade with Israel's illegal settlements, applying boycott and divestment pressure on all the companies in the United Nations database of corporations that are complicit in Israel's illegal settlement enterprise, And those companies that are still omitted from that database, but certainly belong there, like G4S, Hewlett-Packard companies, Elbit Systems, Caterpillar, Hyundai, Heavy Industries, Volvo, Heidelberg Cement, Cemex, and others. Ensuring that, the last point is ensuring that individuals and corporate actors responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity in the context of Israel's regime of illegal occupation and apartheid are brought to justice. This year's Nakba Day, under the threat of the pandemic, is a reminder that justice is indeed indivisible, as Angela Davis said, and as Stefanie reminded us. The key to justice is putting people before profit and realigning priorities everywhere to divest from the military security complex and to invest in health, education, climate protection, dignified jobs, and true human security. Healthcare, not warfare. We stand united against all racism and oppression. We stand united in imagining a dignified life, a dignified world for all without oppression, with racial justice, with gender justice, economic, socio-justice, with climate justice. And we can work together to reach that dream. So to end, there are some actions that are on the chat box on Zoom or on your Facebook pages. You might see them from all the organizations organizing this rally. Please try to participate in some of those proposed actions. We know that together we can prevail, together we shall prevail. Free Palestine.